5 minutes, 30 times a day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. Turns out to be that 5 minutes, in savings was the equivalent of a full-time employee. Little ideas can have big results.
Hi, I'm Wilf Blackburn. I'm delighted to be back with another edition of the Optimal Leadership podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by an old friend of mine, Dean Schroeder. Dean's an expert in many aspects of leadership, but he's perhaps best known for his seminal book on creativity and innovation, Ideas Are Free. Welcome, Dean. Great to have you on the discussion today.
Thank you, Wilf, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolute pleasure. Dean, we'll dive straight into the topic. I mean, whether it's about generating ideas or leading organizations, I think many people know what to do, but it seems to be it's an execution problem. So what we'll talk about today is what's really going on inside organizations that maybe prevents us from doing what we know that we should be doing.
Sounds like a good topic.
And let's start with the topic, as I mentioned, that you're within this, that I know you're perhaps best known for, and it's ideas. I mean, organizations seem to be able to sometimes generate lots of ideas, but they don't always get executed. Maybe you can start with this one. What's really at the heart of this? Why are ideas not being implemented in organizations?
Well, mostly because organizations, if you think about them, are set to pull together a lot of different personalities, a lot of different people, and do tasks. And going back to when we first started seeing what can be called the modern organization with Max Weber and bureaucracy and all that sort of stuff, the whole thing was organizing all these disparate people. And with that is a certain amount of control. And ideas, by their very nature, can be disruptive. And so there's a natural tendency to not necessarily want to change. Now, the real irony is change is given to management. It's up to management to do change. The interesting thing is what we found in our studies over the years, whenever we've had a chance to dig into it and expand it, that 80% of an organization's potential, not actual, but potential to improve and innovate actually comes from the ideas and creativity of the people on the front line, the people that are doing things, the people that know customers, that know systems. But who are the ones that are responsible for making the changes? Most of the time, it's management. It's the people that are distant from that. They've got a different type of information. So it's fascinating to see, but it plays out in the statistics. If you look over time, ever since the invention of the steam engine, actually, productivity has increased on an average of between 1% and 2% a year. Right now, we're a little bit higher than that. You see figures of 2.5, maybe even 3, partly because of we're going through an AI revolution and all of this. But the interesting thing is we tracked and studied companies that could increase at 10, 12, 15% every year. And how they were doing that is they were getting their ideas from the frontline people, and the decisions were being made down there. The fun thing is little ideas. We normally think, oh, it's a little idea, it's worth a nickel or whatever. You don't even think of the power in those little ideas. My favorite example was in my recent book, Practical Innovation in Government, where in the city of Denver, the licensing department, the Bureau of Licensing, Excise and Licensing, couldn't even get in. You could barely get in the room to get your licenses renewed. They have all this chaos, and as a matter of fact, the air conditioner couldn't keep up, and it was about 30 degrees in there Celsius at all times, and they couldn't keep it down. They couldn't keep the temperature down because there were so many people. And so the new manager came in and with a little help from one of the departments in the city that was focused on improvement, moved what was a 2-hour wait time for licenses on average down to 7 minutes. And they did it not by expanding or adding money or throwing extras at it. They did it through ideas. Let me give you an example of one of those. One idea is was that clerks that were filing everything kept getting interrupted. Part of the reason they were getting interrupted was a lot of licenses required background checks. And there was a computer set up in the lobby for people to do their own background checks. And the software wasn't user-friendly. And so they'd get a lot of questions and they'd get interrupted and it'd take them 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Yeah, big deal. Big deal. 5 minutes. But it's 5 minutes 30 times a day. So a couple of the clerks on the front line decided to get together and make a very user-friendly screenshot, push this button, do this, do that, manual that people could go through. Wiped out 5 minutes, 30 times a day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. Turns out to be that 5 minutes was enough to, in savings, was the equivalent of a full-time employee. Just 5 minutes, just little things. And so all of a sudden, little ideas can have big results. The other thing is you get hundreds of them. If you've got the systems in place, if the manager is there that accepts it and says, okay, guys, we got a problem. What are your ideas? Let's look at a bunch of ideas. The other thing it does is save you a bunch of money, but you got to be set up to take them.
So, Dean, seems like from what you're saying, most of the ideas will come from, the good ideas can come from the frontline, people who are dealing directly with customers, with suppliers, distributors, etc. Sounds from what you're saying like the folks that can be the blockers that can get in the way are actually the leaders. What do you find to be the most destructive leaders, behaviors that you see occurring time and time again inside organization that are getting in the way of good ideas being implemented by people who know what the customer's problems are?
Well, there's a couple of things involved. The first one is management's busy. Management's busy and they get a little idea and they don't have time to worry about it. But the problem is not that they don't have time to worry about it, is they don't have the systems in place to handle it at a lower level. So it doesn't get there. The other thing that we run into all the time is management actually thinks they're the boss. They like to behave like the big boss. They have this need for an illusion of control. And it is an illusion because the tighter you grab onto the organization, as a whole, the organization is less in control because the person with that tight reins can't see everything, isn't aware of everything. The best control is to set up an organization where it's a collective control, or everybody is responsible and in control of the area they have the knowledge and expertise on. Yes, there's the ultimate authority and the ultimate responsibility, but behaving too much like you know it all is a big mistake. Power is important to getting things done, but it also can create problems because it distorts your behavior. There is a lot of data that shows that the more powerful you are, the less you think about ideas of other people, the more you think you're right. After all, how'd you get that power? You got the suit, you got the education, you got the salary, you got the parking place with your name on it. I mean, all of these trappings, and they create problems in your thinking. They limit your thinking, believe it or not, and you start thinking you're more important and you should be right. And the fact is, what they should say is, you got a lot of people there with a lot of brains, and you got to turn them loose.
So what do the effective leaders get right in being able to, utilize the power, the authority in a sensible way that engages and empowers people?
Well, that's a good question, and my answer is my initial response is I got this book written by a wise leader, one of my favorite leaders. And listen to the way he starts out the book. I mean, he starts it out. A company is neither a structure or a hierarchy. It is a network of relationships held together by trust, reciprocal economic dependency, and incentives. Relationships. That opening statement in Optimal Leadership basically summarizes what most managers and most people get wrong. Wrong. They think of the organization in terms of structure. They think of employees as in hired hands. This goes back to what economists used to view as the interchangeability of labor and capital, which is it's still there, but they focus on you selling your labor to the corporation or the company, the employer. So there's this exchange thing. And that's what we learned about companies early on. Now that's changing, and it needs to change because it is a community relationship, but that was a dominant element. And so it's part of the thinking that's been around for a long time, for a millennium, the hierarchical boss down control stuff.
Yeah, it's quite tempting, I think, as a CEO to, as you say, to feel maybe we got the job because we're somehow smarter, or and but often, of course, we're just not, and we're just too far away from the problem to know what the right solution can be. Yeah, and but so how what does something need to change in respect of education of leaders, or is it something else, right? Because it sounds so obvious, and yet it's difficult.
Well, the irony is it is obvious and it is terribly difficult. Because you ask any CEO and they say, well, are people important? And 9 out of 10 of them will say yes. Uh, there are some that don't, but where does the CEO spend their time? What do they focus on? And a lot of it is financial statement driven. You know, the board holds them accountable for those financial statements. What will they get fired for if they get fired? What will they get fired for? And that's lack of financial performance. So they look at the finances. As a matter of fact, 50 years ago, you never saw presidents of organizations that came up through finance, or very rarely you did unless it was a financial organization, like a bank or something like that. What they came through was with engineering or other areas, maybe marketing for a while, depending on the type of the company. But today, an increasing number of our CEOs are coming through finance. So they look at the world through a financial statement. And now please excuse me, Wilf. I am a big fan of good financial people. They can tell you what's going on in your company and where to look for problems and all that sort of stuff really quickly. But you can't run a company from an income statement. What you have to do is you have to think deeper and say, what's driving that income statement? And you got to focus it at the root cause of what's driving it, not the symptoms. That takes time to dig down and understand. That takes effort. What we're taught at the top, one of my favorite Nobel Prize winning economists, shall we say, Friedrich Hayek, is an Austrian political economist out of Vienna University, who ended up at the University of Chicago late in life. He says, you can break knowledge down into two areas in an organization. There's the knowledge that the people at the CEO level at the top of the organization have, and what is that? That's big picture stuff. But where do they get the knowledge? They get the knowledge from aggregating, combining, simplifying information at every level till it gets to their level where they've got this overview. And it's an important overview, and it's important for strategic decisions. But what does it tell you about what's really going on in the organization? Well, they can look at it and say, labor's up. Labor costs are up. What can I do at my level? And say, cut bodies. That'll cause us to lower labor. So they have a bunch of layoffs. And what happens in a layoff? Let's look at short-term and long-term. Short-term, what happens in a layoff? Well, everybody's worried. They're getting the job, finding ways to get the job done. They may be taking shortcuts, but the job is getting done, and your labor costs go down. So what happens when your labor costs go down to the bottom line? Bottom line goes up. CEO's a hero for making these cuts. He's a hero. Oh, boy, I really know what I'm doing. But what's happening in the meantime? In the meantime, you're hollowing out your ability to innovate. You're hollowing out your ability to implement ideas. And the best people, the people you want to hang on to, the people that are going to take your company to the next level, are looking around nervously and saying, am I next? and they might jump ship. So in the long run, it oftentimes doesn't get you there. Now, let's reverse this. Say, okay, what is the knowledge of the people down at the bottom? Well, they're actually doing the work. According to Hayek, they have what he calls, you're an economist, you're a Nobel Prize winning economist, you got to use 25-cent words. So what he says, it's the knowledge of time and place. What he's really saying is, hey, they know how things get done. They know how to do things. They can see what's wrong. They can see what's taking too much time. They can see what can be done simpler. They can see what is being done that doesn't need to be done. My favorite one, what can you stop doing? They have all of that knowledge. And the trick is being able to tap that knowledge and merge the two levels simultaneously. And so that the people at the top understand the people at the bottom. And when the people at the top want an innovative new idea, take a new innovation. And this is why one of the things I really encourage leaders to do is spend more time at the bottom. Mm. Going way back, it's the management board walking around. Tom Peters, in his book, Search for Excellence, the first real mega selling business book. Tom Peters, in all of his books, got a lot of things wrong, but that was one thing that he really got right. And think about that for a second. Oh gosh, I don't have time to show up at midnight on the dock on the loading dock with a bunch of donuts. I don't have time to go down with a couple of pizzas and talk to the people that are doing the packing of our products and stuff like that. But you know what? You start doing that as a CEO, a couple things happen. First of all, if you really talk to them and sit down, like I say, donuts is an excuse to break down barriers. Pizza is an excuse. I used to do beer management, but you can't do that anymore. I was much younger, and it's kind of frowned on these days. But it was very effective. I really found out what was going on in my organizations by a little bit of beer management. You get a couple of beers into people after work, and all of a sudden things loosen up. So why do you do this? I don't know what's wrong with that. I thought, it causes this problem. And all of a sudden, bang, it's a crazy way to get ideas, but you get a sense for what's going on. This is the big thing. But the other thing I'm finding is a lot of CEOs learn to really enjoy that because it's a real relief from the pressures and some of the forces at the top of the organization. And you get to see real people. You get to talk to real people. You get to know your organization. But you know what else happens? Hey, Wilf isn't such a bad guy. He brought us donuts and sat and actually listened to us. By the way, one of the things I found out is that he sent me a note afterwards. He followed up on one of my ideas. And all of a sudden, we don't have to fill out that extra piece of paperwork because it's not needed anymore. And all we have to do is check 2 boxes. And, stuff like that. And so it's a win-win type of situation. So somehow you have to find ways to bridge that gap. Personally, as a CEO, spend time out of your corner office and down in the trenches. You get loyal employees, and they'll do things for you that can't. They'll be willing to step forward with ideas and take a chance. Why? Because they trust you. Trust is the big thing. Why don't people give more ideas even though they have them? They don't think they're wanted, and they don't necessarily trust the reaction, and you got to overcome that.
Thoughts in there, Dean. I'll just pick up on a couple, if I may. You mentioned about time, and often CEOs feel they don't have the time. My experience has been that the CEO has more discretionary time than anybody else in the organization. Sometimes we don't realize it. There's another thought as well. Presumably, you'll see that when CEOs spend time with the people who are doing the real work, they act as role models for other leaders in the organization as well, and then it spreads. It becomes more habitual.
Very good point. Very good point. Because that becomes that becomes not only accepted but expected.
And we're more likely to make better decisions to the extent that we need to make them as leaders if we've been more exposed to the reality of the business, presumably as well. We get better decisions.
Yeah, there's a school of thought in leadership. It's an old school of thought, and it's a wrong school of thought. The school of thought is you don't want to get to know your people too well because you might have to fire them. You don't want them to have too much influence on your decisions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You've got to be the boss. Well, guess what? All the data, the real good data, shows just the opposite. Some of the largest studies in the world on leadership all come up that relationship is important because that's important in trust, that's important in understanding, that's important in how you develop people and how you respond to people, and how you work with people. That relationship is important. You have to know what is important to your people, not only from a business standpoint, from a personal standpoint. You did a good job of that in the book, by the way, when you said, what questions do you ask to people when talking to them? They're the personal questions. And you can't just go through that in sort of a rote thing. Well, let's see, I got to ask how the wife is. Who was the wife anyways? And the kids. No, you should know those things and genuinely be interested because that's what's important to them. Before you can expect them to do what's important for you and consider what's important for you. The number one thing is well, it's like teaching evaluations. I hate to go back to that, but it's like teaching evaluations are sort of a microcosm that has been studied a lot of employees. The most popular teachers are those that care. Those that the single most important factor in getting a good teaching evaluation is that they feel you care. Doesn't matter how bad you lecture or how bad you do things like, I mean, it does matter, but what they learned or how tough you were or whatever. But the big thing is they've got to feel you care. Your boss, first of all, has to care for you as an individual, but also has to be the boss. One of my favorite companies, and I don't know how they're doing now. I haven't been in there in more than a decade, and they've been bought out by Volkswagen, was Scania, the Swedish truck company. And Scania's engine plant outside of Stockholm had an annual increase in productivity of 15% a year. Not one or two like is normal, but 15% year after year. And they did it in some very interesting ways. First of all, they put a lot of slack in the system. They'd have a team of 8 was needed to do the job. They'd put 10 in there. Why? One reason, this is Sweden, and they might be on a 6-month maternity leave, or they might be off for training, or they might be missing. So instead of having floaters that you assigned a group, you had the team. Now, the other thing is if you had everyone there, they were working on improvement ideas. They'd stop the production line, 8 minutes every day and once a week for 26 minutes and work on ideas. But here's the point. They had 3 areas they looked at. First was safety. Was there a safety issue? What is that? That is saying people are important. Your safety is important. We don't want you hurt going to work. That's important. Second thing is quality. Is there a quality issue? What is quality? Quality is the customer. It's the person, then the customer. Third one is line speed. That's productivity. That's the company. So it's first the employee, then the customer, then the company. And I always thought that was brilliant. 3. How many CEOs, how many companies are organized that company comes first, where they focus on what's good for the company and what's good for people and customers they're important, but they're not as important. I got to make that quarterly number.
Systematic approach to managing ideas. It sounds counterintuitive when we're talking about creativity, but clearly there's a science behind it. One of the other things I love about the example you've used there is this is an organization you're describing that really does believe and practice the mantra that if you take care of the people, then the people will take care of the business. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, there's a lot to it. It's not as simple as that. It's not abdication of responsibility. It's setting up the systems. It's information flow. It's communications. There's a lot that needs to go along with that. But the first thing is trust and understanding, and then building that system. The other thing that happens is, I can't remember who said it, but I think it was Drucker who said, culture eats strategy for lunch. And you can have all the strategies you want, but it's that culture. It's what's important to the people. It's what people recognize as the way we do things around here. It's how you create that positive culture. That takes time and effort. It can't be done overnight.
And consistent leadership behavior as well. And I'm thinking about that as you're speaking, because much of what you're describing, you spend time with people, show how much you care. In fair weather, that's relatively easily done. But I guess when the pressure comes, then we get to see if the behavior of leaders is consistent over time.
Absolutely. My favorite example in that area was Ken Iverson, uh, the famous CEO that created Nucor. The steel industry goes up and down and up and down. And even when it went down, at one time during the Rust Belt recession of '08, I think it was, sales went, may even been earlier than that, I can't remember. Sales were down, and he kept the day incentive in place, but they just cut days. So they were down to 3 days instead of 5 days. And heavy incentive focusing on people. People didn't even think that their incentive system might go out. They made, by the way, about as much money off of the incentive system as they did their salary. But the other thing that happened that was interesting is it got so bad he had to cut salaries. But he cut them progressively. So he was by far the lowest paid CEO in the Fortune 500 at the time, because he made what a good engineer in a normal company would make during this time period, because his salary was cut back so much. And you can't complain too much taking a 5 or 10% cut at the ground level when your boss is getting a 20% cut and the CEO is getting a real haircut, 40%, 50%. And so that shows people that you're taking it carefully. Now, mind you, who's got more flexibility financially? And I would think that the CEO actually can take the hit of 60% more easily than the guy on the front line takes a hit of 10%.
Yeah, that's a great example, Dean, of leading by example. Yeah. That's a really, really powerful one. Dean, you mentioned in the book that these ideas are free. So why do you think so few organizations treat ideas as if they're valuable?
It's a perspective. It's a mindset. I don't have time to pick up nickels off the floor. Well, the point is, if you got everybody picking up nickels off the floor, and you don't have to make the decision to pick up the nickel, but the first guy that sees the nickel grabs it and puts it in the company till, it makes a big difference. But we just don't think, we're all looking for the big idea, the thing that's going to change the industry. AI, it's going to change things. Hey, I got news for you, Wilf. For AI to have the impact in your company it needs, you need a lot of little ideas on how to use it, how to improve it, how to set it up. It's going to come from the people on the front lines. It's not going to come from your IT department. Your IT department may facilitate it, but we don't think that way normally. We think of the big ideas. Most people don't think that way. I remember one of my first jobs, my boss had a sign in his office, and he said, "Keep in mind the big picture." Yeah, but the big picture is made up of a whole lot of little pictures. And it was just we talk teamwork, but do we really do it? We talk empowerment, but do we really do it? We want ideas and innovation, but do we have the systems and structures in place for that? No, we have the systems and structures in place for control and conformance. That's the whole nature of an organization. We've got to control it, right? So we just don't think in those terms.
Yeah.
Change ideas are chaotic. We don't like chaos. We like consistency, uniformity. We want to get things like they expect. The other thing is, you change something, what happens? Other things have to change. That's one thing. The other thing is, you don't always get it right in the beginning. Your performance actually dips before it goes up. And you've got to be willing to pay tuition for that learning. This is all about organizational learning. And you got to pay that tuition up front. You got to invest the time to give the people the time to work on it. We were with a major, one of the major medical companies in the world, actually, and they brought us in because their idea system wasn't working. Well, we got in there and we looked at their idea system, and everything was set up and structured properly, except for one thing. One thing. They accounted for every second of the frontline employee's job, and it had to be tied to a specific contract, a specific product, a specific activity. And guess what? Their accounting system didn't have, I'm working on an idea as one. So the problem is they could come up with the ideas, but they didn't have the time to actually implement all their ideas.
Yeah, and it takes, I guess it takes time. One of the thoughts that's gone through my mind as you were speaking there, Dean, is one about psychological safety. Because if we want to have a lot of ideas, they're not all, we're saying, yeah, lots of small ideas. We don't know which will be the big one, and then maybe the big one, we thought it was a small one. We just don't know. But creating a culture where people are willing to put their ideas forward, willing to execute them, they're not all going to work. I guess people need to feel psychologically safe, that it's okay that ideas don't work out the way we expected. Is that right?
It's right on target. For example, as a leader, you know that you're going to make mistakes. And the object is correcting those mistakes. As a leader, you're in a better position to do that if you've got the company that has the agility. The problem we face is if we have too high a hurdle to try an idea or to get an idea accepted, there's a lot invested in that idea. So even if it's a bad idea, we can't let it go. If you can lower that threshold to the point where it's easy to get an idea accepted and you try the idea, it doesn't work, bang, you untry it that quick. And what have you learned? You learned what didn't work. It's like Thomas Edison and the light bulb. When a reporter said, so you made a 1,000 mistakes when you tried to make an incandescent light bulb because they all failed. He says, no, I learned 1,000 things that didn't work, but I only needed to find one that did. And the whole point is, what is the cost of failure? And you got to lower the cost of failure. Now, there's a trick to that. And the trick goes back to my friend Iverson again. When we were talking to Iverson's chief strategist, corporate office, when we visited him, was 15 people, and counting staff support. 15 people in corporate for Fortune 500 company. But talking to, I can't remember his name, the chief strategist, he said, when I first came on board, Ken said, you're going to make, some $250,000 mistakes, at least a couple of them while you're here. So don't worry about it. Just please don't make them in the same quarter, a financial quarter. But the point is, if the idea is not going to hit the ship below the water line, so it takes on water, just try it. Or find a way to try it at low cost, low risk. And just lower that so you can try it, test it, throw it away, try another thing, throw it away. But you've got to have the trust and the comfort that you're not going to get into trouble and that it's okay to fail occasionally. And so that's the only way you learn. The important thing is that you learn from your failures.
Yeah. And so you've been emphasizing the word learning much more than the idea of failure or mistake. It sounds like that's one of the tricks to unleashing the creativity in people.
I run into work with a lot of top managers and stuff like that shake their head and say, oh God, I made this mistake and it cost us this amount of money, the company this amount of money. I said, well, that's the higher you get in the organization, the more you have to pay for tuition. And that's tuition. Now, that's another to this is lower the cost of tuition, especially at the frontline level. And the other, what a lot of managers have problems with And I had problems with this. I still remember one of my early examples when I was running a plant, a foundry of all things. I started out as a foundryman, and one of my guys came up with this idea he just really wanted to try. And I looked at it and I listened to him and I thought, that's never going to work. That's silly. This and this and this are going to happen. And I didn't want to discourage him though. And I said, okay, what's it going to cost me? And I said, well, it's going to cost a bunch of his time, but by the time he got through, it was totally different than I thought it was. And it worked wonderfully, but I would have shut it down because I know better. Well, it turns out I didn't know better and I didn't really fully understand all the nuances. And I also think he actually cheated because when he tried it, he learned why it didn't work, my problem that I was having with it, and came up with some ways to fix that and to change things. And but the point is, if I hadn't been willing to, and that changed, I can't remember what it was, but it increased line speed by about 15 seconds a unit, which over the course of a day we were doing about 60 units. So what is that? That turns out to be 2 more units a day, which is quite extensive actually when it adds up. Just because I was willing to let him learn.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Come back to an earlier point you made, Dean, and it's, I guess, about creating the capacity for learning. You mentioned an organization that was clear on its priorities and focus. I think you mentioned it was safety, quality, and speed. I
Right,
think,
right.
I guess, leaders that are clear about the priorities, clear about the focus, that frees up a lot of everybody's time, including the time to experiment, be creative, and innovate.
It does. One of the things that I often do when I'm starting up an idea system with a company is I start out with, because everybody's concerned about the time. So I start out for the first 3 months having a campaign, come up with ideas on how to save time. How to save time. And then I give them a tutorial on how to spot time wasters. First of all, what are we doing that we shouldn't be doing? How do we consolidate things to do things in multiple levels, et cetera. And so you start out, and I have never found a situation where we haven't been able to save 2 to 3 times more time than we're going to consume through our idea system and managing the idea system. It's always been a winner. So if you're worried about time, it's a short-term risk. You just start out. Let's find ways to save time. And as the old saying goes, time is money.
Yeah.
And where do you invest it? Where do you invest your money? In this case, you invest your time in having more time.
Yeah. I've certainly found in big organizations we can lose sight of the fact that everybody's time is a cost. Yeah, working with entrepreneurs in smaller organizations, that's never a problem. But
Right,
somehow the
right.
path from becoming a small company to a big company that can get lost. That every
Yeah.
has a cost. I think your very practical idea about how can we save time, which is often about people, which is all about people because time belongs to people. Is what can we stop doing, or what can we do less frequently, maybe?
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point. There's an old saying that nothing succeeds like success. Actually, that's wrong. Nothing fails like success. And the reason is we're successful, we grow, and how do we hang on to that culture that we let it drift away from us? The same entrepreneurial spirit and stuff like that. What we did to get this to this size is different than what we have to do to get to the next size. And we have to put in systems where things used to be a small company, you talk about it. What do? You get together at lunch, you eat lunch together, you have pizza together. You troubleshoot, you fight to grow. You've got this creativity. As you hire more and more people on, it sort of dilutes the core team, but it also, now you got to put rules in place. You got to put some structure to it. But what we never put in is the structure and the systems to make sure we keep that dynamic going. that creative problem solving dynamic. And that's where ideas are free, and putting in structures to make sure you do that. You don't need them when you're real small and everyone's around the table. But as you grow, you need to put in more and more sophisticated structures. And if you do that in a timely manner, you'll hang on to that entrepreneurial spirit until you're much, much larger. You can grow much longer.
Yeah, yeah, and because every big company started out as a small company, and something can get lost along the way. I mean, you mentioned one. I guess one of the big takeaways for me is you've been helping big companies to become innovative. It's a very systematic approach that's required, and it's not that the employees don't have lots of ideas. It's the successful companies are the ones that allow the ideas, find ways to allow the ideas to surface and then to make them stick.
Absolutely. That, if we still have time, I want to go into another story.
Please
This was
do.
when we were studying innovation in companies, and we were talking to the vice president for innovation, not R&D, but innovation, at a Fortune 500 company, and he says, "Oh, that's innovation is easy. You hire innovative people." Well, we had done a study. From studies, we knew that it's not dependent on age. It's not dependent on education. It's not dependent on a lot of things we think is related to innovation. It's not. So there's really not necessarily the standard ways of thinking about how do you hire innovative people. So he said, well, how do you hire innovative people? He says, oh, that's easy. You get the rebels. You get the guys with earrings, tattoos, all this sort of stuff that's strange, the nonconformists. I got thinking about that and saying, why do you need the nonconformists? And all of a sudden it dawned on me. The reason he needed the nonconformists was he needed people that were willing to battle the systems the company had to get things through, that were the rebels. Well, dang it. That's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to make sure you don't have to battle the systems, that the systems on your side. And that's the key. Oh, and by the way, that company pretty much went bankrupt, even though it was a Fortune 500 company at the time.
Right. So your advice is change the system, change the conditions such that people are enabled to be at their creative best.
And change the systems to reinforce the culture you want.
Mm.
Because that behavior that you want people stepping forward with their ideas. Or in many cases, just doing them, trying them, and before stepping forward with them, having them already proven. Do they have the ability to do that? Can they try it? Can they try an idea? That way, they're not making a fool of themselves either by coming up with a crazy idea. But the other thing is embrace those crazy ideas. Some of them lead to some things they might be. You hear there's no such thing as a bad idea, right? You've heard that. Mm. Well, that's a bunch of baloney. There's terrible ideas. There's unsafe ideas, illegal ideas, just plain stupid ideas. But the point is, it's an idea. So what do you do with it? How do you reject it? Someone comes up with a stupid idea and comes up to you as a frontline manager. You say, it's an interesting idea. How'd you come up with that? Why'd you come up with that? Chances are they identified a real problem that you want to solve. They got a crazy idea for it, but they got a real problem. So then you say, you identified a good problem. Well done. I don't think this is going to work because legal's not going to let us do it, or come up, some sort of excuse. Say, or we don't have $500,000 to invest here. What if we had 200? What could we do? Maybe not solve it all, but a little bit. Because that's my other favorite thing. Instead of spending a lot of money on a big problem, nibble it to death by ducks. Little ideas, because little ideas are safe. They don't cost much. They can implement. You can undo them. But the other thing is you learn as you go, because you can try things and get a better understanding of what the real problem is as you're incrementally solving little parts of it. Unfold, and oh, by the way, the problem isn't over here. It's really over here. This is the root cause, so we got to go that way. And you'd have done this and spent billions and wasted time and disrupted the organization.
Yeah, and as you were saying earlier, Dean, I guess then the threshold is lower as well. Typically with the smaller ideas, the cost of failure is maybe more the more tolerable. And an additional point that you're alluding to as well, I think, is that if there are lots and lots of small ideas, the big ideas will more naturally emerge as well, where there's a habit of letting ideas come up.
They'll be more successful, and some of them can emerge from underneath. There's another thing that we don't like to talk about sometimes, and that's politics.
Right.
I mean, organizations don't have politics, right? Well, little ideas fly under the radar. They don't compete for budgets. They don't threaten other departments by this unit getting that and that one getting other things. They're nice. They're simple. Oftentimes they go unrecognized by people in other departments or other managements. All of a sudden they just look over and say, "Hey, Wilf runs a pretty efficient department over there." The other thing that we have a problem with, ironically, is what happens when you have an efficient department versus an inefficient department when it comes to budgeting time. That's another thing we got to watch out for, because sometimes we're tempted to cut the budget of the efficient department or give them less because they're doing such a good job. We don't reward them. We reward the guy that's running the department that needs all these big ideas or all these other things to try to get efficiency because it's not there, versus the person that's just.
Yeah, and you were talking about culture earlier, and one of my sort of favorite frameworks for looking at culture includes understanding what gets rewarded.
Yeah, it is. And the other thing I would add to that, you did a good job of that in this little book I read. By the way, it was fun going through it again in preparation for our meeting, because I haven't read it since it was first came out.
Likewise.
And it's fun to go over it. But the thing we also don't realize is what is a reward. You say what is rewarded, and we think of bonuses, we think of prizes, we think of pay levels, we think of all these things. But a lot of rewards are much more subtle. They're a pat on the back, they're a smile and a nod, there's a lot. Look at what your organization, how they reward and treat people, and it's remembering a name. Maybe I don't know. It depends on the organization, but the point is, most rewards are day-to-day reinforcements that you might not even think of as rewards. So in addition to aligning your incentive system right, and your pay structure right, and your bonus structure right, and all the normal reward things, think of all the non-financial and other rewards.
Right. So the recognition, Dean. Yeah, you're saying that's at least as important as the reward with let's say a monetary value.
Absolutely, and recognition is a tough one, because different people look for different things. Certain people say, I just, the CEO or the big boss stopping by my cubicle and just making a comment and giving me an attaboy is great, whereas another person might want that employee of the month. The big thing. Everyone is different. That's where relationship comes in, because you have to know what the best way of rewarding somebody is. It might be just a note from the CEO with a gift card to McDonald's. Who the heck knows is important to somebody, versus another person that's stupid. And want something else. Understanding your people, and that gets tough as the organization gets bigger, and that's where you need middle managers who also buy in and know the game and know how to treat people right. It becomes important, because you got to be reliant on them. And if they call you up and say, "Hey, can you stop by? And I'm throwing a pizza lunch for, we achieved this goal in the unit. Any way you can stop by and have a slice of pizza with us?" You should be there in a shot. Because what are you doing? You're supporting the front line, you're supporting your person. But the other thing is, you have to have the middle manager that feels comfortable doing that knows your values, that they can say, and you know what? It's fun as CEO. It's fun because all of a sudden it's not a problem, it's not a boredom. You're celebrating success with the guys that did it. It's meaningful for you. It's reinvigorating for you. It's fun for the guys and the gals. Excuse me, I'm a guy. What can I say? But those folks on the front line.
Yeah, and I mean, you make a great point. Few CEOs would say that they have most of their fun in the job in the boardroom.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's first foundry I ran. I was pretty young. I was an engineer with an MBA, and I was 27 years old. And my favorite time was at the end of the shift, walking around with some of the guys and just looking at everything we produced that day. It was that sense of accomplishment and the sense of the team that we did it together and stuff like that. That was my favorite time, and I always tried to make sure to do that so everyone went home with a feeling of accomplishment. That was fun.
Yeah, it sure, and that's a great way to finish, Dean. I was thinking I'd try and bring it all together in one sentence. There are just way too many valuable insights there for me to even attempt to do that, and it wouldn't do justice to it. And you've been working on this for decades, and thanks so much for sharing so many wonderful insights and so many, practical ideas as well. Much appreciated, Dean. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Wilf, and keep up the good work on your optimal leadership. That's an important message. It needs to get out there. It needs to be believed and acted upon, and it can change a lot of lives and influence a lot of people. So keep up the good work in that area.
Thanks for the encouragement, Dean. Much appreciated also.
You bet.